She had worked in that restaurant for years, not because she loved the job, but because it was steady work and her family needed her help. Every day she arrived early in her worn-out shoes, tying her apron tight around her waist, ready to face the long hours ahead. The restaurant was not just any place. It was one of those high-end restaurants where the floors gleamed, chandeliers sparkled, and the tables were set with fine china. People came not just for the food, but to see and be seen. Most customers were in suits and dresses, speaking in low, refined voices and tipping generously. But for her, it was another day of rushing between tables, refilling glasses, and taking orders with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. The morning had been busy, as usual. She moved quickly, balancing plates, refilling water, and cleaning tables before the next round of diners arrived. Her back ached, her feet throbbed, and her stomach growled from skipping breakfast again. Yet she kept moving. This was life, and she had accepted it long ago. No complaints, no excuses, just her and the restaurant dot. By mid-afternoon, the crowd had thinned a little. The sunlight poured in through tall windows, reflecting off the polished surfaces. In the corner of the room sat an old piano, its polished black surface dusty in places and slightly faded from years of neglect. It was the kind of piano that once might have seen music, laughter, and applause, but now it was mostly decoration. Occasionally, a staff member would press a key while joking with a customer, but no one took it seriously. Most of the time, the piano stayed silent, as if it had given up hope that anyone would ever play it again. She liked to hum quietly while working. She didn't sing aloud because the restaurant was full of customers who expected a certain kind of quiet elegance. But sometimes she would hum a little tune from her childhood, just softly enough that it followed her from table to table. It reminded her of simpler times when she was a child and her grandfather used to play music for her. Those memories were tucked away like a small treasure, and sometimes they came out in the form of a soft melody as she cleaned the tables. That afternoon, a group of important guests arrived. One of them was a man who immediately drew attention. He was a millionaire, well known for his wealth, style, and a presence that seemed to fill the room without saying a word. The staff noticed him instantly. The regular customers looked at him with curiosity, and even the chefs paused for a moment, as if to see what he would do. He did not rush in or look for a seat. Instead, he walked slowly through the restaurant, observing everything: the layout, the tables, the waiters, the chandeliers, and finally, the piano in the corner. She noticed him too. She was arranging silverware when she saw the man's gaze settle on her. It made her nervous, though she could not understand why. He had a presence that demanded attention, yet he carried himself in a calm, almost gentle way. He stopped near her table, and for a moment she froze, unsure of what to do. She continued arranging the cutlery, pretending not to notice him, but she could feel his eyes on her. It was a strange feeling, not quite threatening, not quite friendly, but it made her heart race. He looked at the piano and then back at her. There was a spark of curiosity in his eyes, the kind of look that suggested he was testing the waters, seeing if she might respond in an unexpected way. Then, in a voice low enough that only she could hear, he said, "Do you play the piano?" Her hands paused mid-motion. She looked up at him, unsure what to say. The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. Her mind raced. Did he mean seriously, or was he just making small talk? She swallowed hard. She had not played the piano in years, not since her grandfather had passed away, not since life had demanded that she focus on work and responsibilities instead of music. But something in his voice made her hesitate, something kind, patient, and encouraging, rather than judging. I used to," she whispered, her voice almost lost among the background clinking of dishes and soft music piped from speakers. "Used to?" He said, smiling slightly. Why not anymore? She shook her head, looking down at the silverware. Life got in the way, she said simply. That was all she could manage. Life had always seemed to get in the way. School ended early. Her family needed her, bills piled up, and the piano lessons that once filled her days became impossible. Dreams were something for people who could afford them, she thought, and she could not. He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she expected. Then, to her utter shock, he said, "Sit down. Play something for me." Her heart skipped a beat. She looked at him in disbelief. The entire room seemed to shrink around her. Customers stopped talking, waiters paused in their duties, and even the chefs appeared to peek through the service window to see what was happening. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. The words seemed impossible, yet there they were. Play something for me. Her first instinct was to refuse. I can't, she said softly, shaking her head. I haven't played in years. He smiled warmly, leaning slightly toward her. That's exactly why I want to hear you play. No one expects perfection. Just let it out. Show me what's inside. Something inside her stirred. She had kept the music buried, locked away in a box of old memories and quiet regret. And now, someone completely unexpected was asking her to open that box again. She hesitated, trembling slightly, before walking toward the piano. Every step felt surreal. The floor felt softer, the lights brighter, and her heart beat faster than it had in years. She ran her fingers along the keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath her fingertips. Dust floated into the sunlight, catching tiny glimmers in the air, but it did not bother her. She took a deep breath and sat down, adjusting the stool to a comfortable height. She closed her eyes for a moment, and memories flooded back, the long hours beside her grandfather, his gentle guidance, the way music had always been a part of her life, whispering stories and emotions she could never put into words. Her fingers hovered above the keys, hesitant at first. She played a soft, tentative note. It echoed slightly in the restaurant, drawing a few curious glances from the diners nearby. A second note followed, then a third. Slowly, like a river finding its path after being blocked, her fingers remembered the motions they had long forgotten. The melody started simple, soft, and hesitant. Her hands shook slightly, but as the first few notes filled the air, she felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was as if the piano was welcoming her back, forgiving her for the years she had left it untouched. The millionaire watched quietly, leaning back slightly, but with an intensity in his gaze that made her aware of every note she played. Other diners began to notice. Conversations quieted. Forks and spoons paused mid-air. Even the staff stopped, holding their breath as they listened. Something about the music was captivating. It was not just skill. It was emotion, raw and real. A story told through sound rather than words. Every note carried a piece of her past, a memory of hope, struggle, and love. She was no longer the nervous waitress balancing plates and silverware. She was a storyteller, a musician, a daughter of memories that refused to fade. Her eyes closed, and she played without thinking, letting her fingers glide over the keys, letting the melody speak for her. Each chord carried a sense of longing, each pause a breath of relief, each rise a spark of joy she had not felt in years. The millionaire's smile widened slightly, but he remained quiet, letting her take the stage. He could have said something, applauded early, or interrupted, but he knew that this moment was hers, not his. The room, too, seemed to sense it. Silence stretched, heavy but gentle, as if the world itself had stopped to listen. And then it happened. The notes grew bolder, richer, and more confident. The trembling in her hands disappeared, replaced by strength and clarity. The melody was no longer just a song. It was a declaration, a proof that talent and passion never truly die, even when life seems determined to bury them. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, and whispers filled the background. Is she? She can play like that? I didn't expect that. The sound had captured everyone, even the most skeptical patrons, and transformed the restaurant into a theater of astonishment. She finished the piece with a soft, lingering note. It hung in the air, trembling slightly before fading. The silence that followed was deafening in its intensity. For a moment, no one moved. Then came the sound of quiet applause, soft but genuine, as if the world had just witnessed something rare and magical. She opened her eyes, trembling, cheeks flushed, and met the millionaire's gaze. He smiled. I knew you had it in you, he said simply. She felt a mixture of shock, pride, and disbelief. No one had ever said something like that to her. Not a teacher, not a mentor, not even her family. She had spent years doubting herself, but in that moment, she realized that she still had something precious, something that could not be taken away by life's hardships. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Customers lingered, talking about the performance, some even tipping more generously, not just for her service, but for the music that had moved them. Staff whispered among themselves, amazed at the transformation they had witnessed. And through it all, she felt a new energy, a spark of something she had almost forgotten hope about for the first time in years. She imagined what might be possible if she pursued her music again. She thought of lessons she had wanted, of songs sh. After the performance, she returned to her tasks, but something inside her had changed. The hum of the restaurant, the clatter of dishes, and the low murmur of conversations seemed different now. Everything looked sharper, brighter, as if the world had shifted just slightly to remind her that there was more to life than the routine she had been living. Yet, as she refocused on her duties, her mind kept drifting back to the piano and the man who had asked her to play. She had always been careful about keeping her past hidden. Most people thought of her as just a hard-working waitress, cheerful, polite, and efficient. Few knew about the hours she had spent at the piano as a child, learning scales, chords, and melodies under the patient guidance of her grandfather. Music had been her secret, a private world where she could express herself without fear, without judgment. But life had been relentless. Her parents struggled to make ends meet, and when her grandfather passed away, she had no one left to nurture that talent. Her mind wandered back to her childhood home. It had been small but warm, with a kitchen that always smelled faintly of spices and bread. Her grandfather's study had been her sanctuary, a place where the piano stood proudly against the wall, polished and shiny. He had always encouraged her, telling her that music was not just notes on a page, but a way to speak the language of the soul. She remembered the evenings they spent together, her small fingers learning to press the keys in the right order, her grandfather's hands guiding hers. He had taught her not just technique, but emotion, expression, and courage. Her family's financial struggles had ended that chapter. Lessons stopped, the piano remained unused, and she buried the music deep inside her heart. For years, she told herself that music was a luxury she could not afford. She focused on work, on survival, on responsibilities. And now, sitting in that high-end restaurant, the old feelings had rushed back unexpectedly. She glanced around the room. The customers had returned to their conversations, some still whispering about the performance. The staff, too, were amazed, sharing quiet remarks about how beautiful it had been. Yet, she felt a mixture of pride and unease. Pride because she had remembered the music, unease because she realized how much she had missed it. It had been years, yet the piano had remembered her. Her fingers had known what to do without conscious thought. Like an old friend greeting her after a long separation, the millionaire was gone now, having left quietly after giving her that gentle nod of encouragement. She wondered about him. Why had he asked her to play? Was it curiosity, a bet, or genuine belief in her talent? She might never know, but she felt grateful, and more importantly, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. That night, after her shift, she returned home with a tired body, but a mind that refused to rest. Her small apartment was modest, the walls bare except for a few framed photographs of her family. She made herself a simple dinner, barely tasting it, and then sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. She thought about her grandfather, the piano, and the melodies she had played. Memories and emotions stirred within her like a storm, mixing joy, regret, and longing. She wondered if she could ever play again outside of the restaurant. The thought of taking lessons, performing in front of people who truly listened, and creating music that could move others, filled her with both excitement and fear. Life had always been about responsibility and survival, not dreams and ambitions. Yet a small spark inside her refused to be ignored. That spark had been reignited by one simple act, sitting at the piano and letting her fingers speak. The next morning, she arrived at work earlier than usual, feeling restless. The restaurant was quieter, fewer customers, more time to think. She passed the piano in the corner, hesitating for a moment. The keys looked the same, dusty and unused, yet somehow they seemed to call her, whispering that the music was still there, waiting. She touched a key lightly and smiled. The note sounded soft and familiar. She felt her heart lift. Perhaps, she thought, it was not too late to embrace what she had loved. She could not ignore it any longer. Music had been part of her identity for as long as she could remember. It had shaped her emotions, her memories, and her understanding of the world. It was not just a hobby. It was a language through which she understood herself and others. She realized that in the hustle and struggle of life, she had neglected this part of herself. The performance in the restaurant had reminded her that the music was not gone. It had been waiting, patient, for her return. Throughout that day, she found herself thinking constantly about music. The piano haunted her thoughts, but in a pleasant way. She imagined her fingers dancing across the keys, playing melodies she had long forgotten. She remembered the joy of creating something beautiful, of expressing what words could not capture. It was an ache, but a sweet one, a reminder that her talent was real, and it still belonged to her. During her lunch break, she walked through the nearby park, letting the wind brush against her face. She watched children playing, couples walking hand in hand, and street musicians performing for anyone who would listen. She noticed a young violinist practicing under a tree, her bow moving gracefully across the strings. The music was imperfect, but it carried emotion, passion, and honesty. She smiled, feeling a connection, realizing that music was not about perfection. It was about expression, about touching hearts. Returning to work, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Serving tables, taking orders, and cleaning dishes felt lighter somehow. She had something to look forward to, something that went beyond the monotony of daily tasks. The piano in the corner no longer seemed like a decoration or a relic of forgotten times. It was an invitation, a challenge, and a promise all at once. The days passed, and she continued to work, but her mind was often elsewhere. She found herself humming little tunes while serving customers, her fingers tapping softly on counters and tables as if playing invisible keys. Some customers noticed and smiled. A few commented on how soothing it was. Her colleagues looked at her differently too, sensing that something had changed. There was a lightness in her steps, a quiet confidence that had been absent for years. She started to think about her options. Could she take lessons again? Where would she find the time and resources? The thought of pursuing music seemed almost impossible, yet she could not ignore it. She remembered the encouragement in the millionaire's eyes, the gentle way he had asked her to play. It had been so simple, so brief, yet it had awakened something she thought was lost forever. That moment lingered in her mind, a reminder that sometimes a single person's belief can change everything. That evening, after another long shift, she sat by the window once more. She thought about the path ahead, the obstacles, and the uncertainties. But for the first time, she felt a sense of hope. She realized that pursuing music was not about escaping reality. It was about embracing who she truly was, about giving life to a part of herself that had been silenced for too long. She promised herself that she would find a way, no matter how difficult it might be. The following week, she began small. During quieter moments at work, she would sit at the piano for a few minutes, letting her fingers explore the keys. At first, she was hesitant, unsure if she remembered enough to play properly. But slowly, the melodies returned, guided by muscle memory and emotion. She played softly at first, almost shyly, then gradually with more confidence. The piano responded, notes clear and resonant, filling the restaurant with a gentle music that drew curious glances from customers. One afternoon, a regular customer stopped by her table after hearing her play. He complimented her talent and encouraged her to consider music professionally. He mentioned local music schools and teachers who could help her refine her skills. She felt a flutter of excitement and anxiety. Could she really take that step? Could she leave behind her routine and risk failure? Yet the thought of never trying again seemed far worse, that the small acts of playing each day strengthened her confidence. Her fingers became more agile, her melodies more expressive. She began to dream of performing in front of people again, of sharing her music beyond the restaurant walls. Each note played was a step toward reclaiming a part of herself she had almost lost. Her life at the restaurant remained the same on the surface: long hours, demanding customers, endless tasks. Yet inside, she carried a secret joy, a quiet fire that warmed her heart. Music had become her companion, her refuge, and her hope. She realized that talent alone was not enough. Courage was needed too. Courage to face the fear of failure, courage to embrace vulnerability, and courage to believe that her dreams were still possible. One evening, after closing the restaurant, she lingered by the piano longer than usual. The night was quiet, the city lights casting a soft glow through the windows. She played a piece she had improvised herself, a combination of old melodies and new ideas. The music flowed naturally, guided by her emotions. It was imperfect, but it was hers, and that was enough. She smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in years. She began to see the possibilities unfolding before her. Perhaps one day she could perform in a proper concert, record her music, or even teach others. The path would not be easy, and challenges would come. But she understood now that music was not just a dream, it was a calling, and she could not ignore it any longer. Days passed, and her life began to feel different, though on the surface, nothing had changed. She still arrived at the restaurant early, tied her apron, and moved between tables with practiced efficiency. Customers still ordered their meals, dishes still clattered in the kitchen, and the steady hum of conversation filled the room. Yet for her, the world had subtly shifted. The piano in the corner, once a silent witness to her routine, had become a source of hope and inspiration. Each day she played, even for a few quiet moments, reminded her that music was alive inside her, waiting to be shared. Her evenings were now filled with practice. After work, she would stay near the piano until the restaurant was empty, letting her fingers dance across the keys. At first, she focused on remembering old pieces she had learned with her grandfather. They were simple melodies, but each note carried memories of childhood joy, laughter, and the quiet guidance of someone who believed in her. The music soothed her, lifted her spirits, and slowly restored the confidence she had thought lost forever. One afternoon, as she played softly, a regular customer approached her table. He had noticed the way she lingered near the piano and had been quietly observing her over the past week. "You have a real gift," he said, his voice calm but sincere. "Have you ever thought about performing somewhere beyond this restaurant?" Her hands froze for a moment, hovering above the keys. The thought had never occurred to her. She had been content, in a quiet, secret way, to let the music be hers alone. Performing in front of an audience seemed impossible, even frightening. I don't know," she said, her voice uncertain. "I've never really played for anyone outside here." He smiled gently. "You should try. There's a local music school that holds small recitals. It's a safe place, nothing fancy, just people who love music. It could be your first step." She felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The idea of performing, even in a small recital, was both thrilling and terrifying. Her heart pounded as she imagined sitting at a piano in front of strangers, her fingers trembling, the pressure to play perfectly overwhelming. Yet, a quiet voice inside her whispered that this was the moment she had been waiting for, the chance to see if her music could touch others, the way it had touched her. That evening, she returned home with a restless mind. She thought about the recital, the music she could play, and the nerves she would have to face. She sat by her small kitchen table, sketching out melodies in her notebook, practicing scales quietly on the edge of the table. Each note brought back a rush of memory, a reminder of why she had loved music in the first place. She realized that this opportunity was more than just a performance. It was a test of courage, a chance to reclaim a part of herself that had been hidden for too long. The next day at work, she found herself drawn to the piano even more than usual. Customers noticed the difference. She hummed softly as she passed tables, fingers tracing invisible keys in her mind. The regular customer returned, offering encouragement and advice. "Start simple," he said. "Choose a piece that speaks to you, something you can play confidently. Remember, it's not about perfection, it's about connection." Her evenings became a routine of preparation. She would arrive home, change into comfortable clothes, and sit at her small keyboard at the corner of her apartment. The music flowed from her fingers, mixing old pieces with new improvisations she created herself. She recorded snippets on her phone, listened critically, and practiced until her fingers remembered the movements naturally. Each night, she felt more confident, more ready to share her music with the world. As the day of the recital approached, nervousness settled in like a heavy cloud. She worried about forgetting notes, playing poorly, or disappointing anyone who came to listen. Her hands shook as she rehearsed in front of her mirror, imagining an audience of strangers staring at her, judging every mistake. She wanted to back out, to retreat to the safety of the restaurant, where no one expected more than polite service. But she remembered the millionaire's words from weeks ago, the encouragement and the belief he had shown in her talent. She remembered the quiet thrill of playing the piano in the restaurant, the way music had filled her with hope and purpose. She realized that the fear she felt was normal, a sign that this opportunity mattered. If she let fear control her, she would lose the chance to show herself and the world what she could do. Finally, the day arrived. The recital was held in a small hall, intimate and welcoming, with wooden floors that reflected the soft light. The room smelled faintly of polish and flowers, the air warm with anticipation. Families, friends, and local music enthusiasts filled the seats, chatting quietly, unaware of the story of the young woman about to perform. She carried her sheet music in one hand, her other hand trembling slightly. Her heart raced as she looked at the piano on stage, the polished black surface gleaming under the soft lights. Backstage, other performers prepared. Children adjusted their bows, teenagers tuned their instruments, and young adults whispered encouraging words to one another. She felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She reminded herself to breathe, to focus on the music, and to remember why she had come here, to let her fingers and her heart tell the story. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage, each step echoing softly against the wooden floor. She felt the eyes of the audience on her, their expectation palpable. She sat down at the piano, adjusted the bench, and opened her music notebook. For a moment, she froze, her fingers hovering above the keys. Then she took a deep breath and began. The first notes were soft, tentative, but confident enough to fill the room. The audience listened quietly, drawn into the delicate melody. Each chord she played carried emotion, speaking without words, conveying the joy, struggle, and passion that had been a part of her life for so long. The music flowed naturally, her fingers moving with memory and instinct, guided by years of love and practice. She glanced up occasionally, noticing the audience's reaction. People leaned forward, captivated by the sound. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others exchanged glances, clearly impressed by the depth and emotion of her performance. She felt a sense of connection, realizing that the music was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone listening. As the piece continued, she grew more confident. Her hands moved with precision, her expression relaxed, and her heart soared. The notes seemed to carry themselves, rising and falling in perfect harmony. She remembered the restaurant, the millionaire's encouragement, and the quiet moments of practice that had brought her here. All of it culminated in this performance, a moment that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Halfway through, she allowed herself to improvise slightly, adding touches she had created during her late-night practices. The melody shifted, became richer, more expressive. The audience responded with subtle nods and smiles, encouraging her without interrupting the flow. She felt a surge of pride and relief, knowing that she had overcome her fear and was sharing a piece of herself with strangers who genuinely appreciated it. When the final note rang out, the hall remained silent for a heartbeat, as if no one could believe what they had just heard. Then applause erupted, filling the room with warmth and admiration. She smiled, tears pricking her eyes, feeling a mix of joy, relief, and disbelief. She had done it. She had faced her fear, stepped onto a stage, and allowed her music to be heard. Backstage, fellow performers and audience members approached her, offering congratulations, compliments, and encouragement. She was overwhelmed by the kindness and recognition, something she had not expected. For years, she had doubted herself, believing that her talent was insignificant. Now, she saw that her music had meaning, that it could touch hearts, and that she had the courage to share it. Later, as she walked home, she reflected on the experience. The city lights glimmered in the distance, and the night air was cool against her skin. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a quiet waitress in a restaurant to a performer on a small stage, reclaiming the passion and talent that had been dormant for so long. She realized that fear, while powerful, could be overcome with determination, practice, and a willingness to take risks. The performance had opened a new door. Opportunities she had never considered now seemed possible. She thought about music schools, teachers, and even future performances. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream not just about survival, but about growth, expression, and fulfillment. She understood that this was just the beginning of a journey that would require hard work, dedication, and courage, but she was ready. In the days that followed, she returned to the restaurant with a renewed sense of purpose. She continued her work, balancing tables and taking orders, but her heart was lighter, her spirit stronger. Each time she passed the piano in the corner, she felt a sense of gratitude and excitement. The music was no longer hidden, it was a living part of her, a reminder that talent and passion could endure. Even in the face of life's challenges, she continued to practice every evening, exploring new melodies, refining her skills, and embracing the joy of music. The small recital had shown her that her talent could be appreciated, and she felt encouraged to pursue more opportunities. Slowly, her confidence grew, and the fear that had once held her back began to fade. And as she After her first recital, her life began to shift in ways she could not have predicted. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly. She continued to work at the restaurant, serving meals, refilling glasses, and cleaning tables, but something had changed in the way she carried herself. There was a quiet confidence in her steps, a lightness in her smile, and a subtle energy in the way she moved between tables. Staff members noticed it, customers noticed it, and even the regular millionaire who had first challenged her to play seemed to sense it. Whenever he visited, word of her talent began to spread quietly at first. A customer who had attended the recital mentioned it to a friend, who mentioned it to someone else. Soon, more people were asking about the waitress who could play the piano. Some came out of curiosity, others with genuine admiration. The restaurant, which had always relied on its food and ambience, suddenly had something more, a story, a human element that drew people in. Her music became a quiet, magical thread woven into the fabric of the dining experience, and she found herself at the center of it, though she had never sought attention. One evening, during a particularly busy dinner service, she noticed a man seated near the piano, quietly observing her. She had seen him before, though not often. He was older, dressed neatly, and carried himself with an air of seriousness. His eyes followed her every move as she moved between tables. But there was a certain softness in his gaze, a genuine curiosity that made her heart flutter with both excitement and anxiety. As the dinner crowd thinned, she found herself with a few quiet moments. Without thinking too much, she walked to the piano and allowed her fingers to dance across the keys. The melody started softly, almost shyly, but soon her confidence returned. She played with emotion, letting the music speak as she had learned to do in her rehearsals. The man leaned forward, listening intently, his expression changing subtly as the music washed over him. When she finished the piece, the man remained silent for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. Then he spoke, his voice calm but full of emotion. "That was remarkable, truly remarkable." She felt her cheeks flush. Compliments were not new to her, but this felt different. There was a depth to his words, a recognition of something more than skill. He continued, "You have a gift that deserves to be shared, not just here, but with the world." She shook her head slightly, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. I don't know if I'm ready for that," she admitted. "I've only just started again. I'm still learning to trust myself." He smiled, a warm and understanding smile that made her feel at ease. "The first step is always the hardest, but you've already taken it, and that's more than most people ever do. Don't let fear stop you. Let the music guide you." His words lingered long after he had left the restaurant. That night, she thought about them as she sat by her small keyboard at home, fingers hovering above the keys. She realized that her fear had been holding her back, not her ability. She could play, she could express, she could connect with others through music. All that was needed was courage, the courage to step beyond the safety of the restaurant and take a risk. The following week, she received an unexpected invitation. A local community center, hearing about her performance through word of mouth, asked if she would perform at a small benefit concert. It was a modest event, with a simple stage, a few dozen chairs, and a modest audience. But it was an opportunity, a real stage, real listeners, and a chance to see how her music could move others outside the restaurant. Her heart raced as she considered the offer. The idea of performing for strangers in a new setting was daunting. Doubts flooded her mind. What if I make a mistake? What if they don't like it? What if I fail? Yet beneath the fear was a stronger feeling, one she had not experienced in years' excitement. The possibility of sharing her music, of stepping into the world she had long avoided, filled her with anticipation. She accepted the invitation, promising herself that she would give it everything she had got in the days leading up to the concert. She practiced relentlessly. Her apartment became her sanctuary. She explored old pieces, refined new melodies, and experimented with small improvisations. Each evening, she played until her fingers ached and her eyes grew heavy. She recorded herself repeatedly, listened critically, and adjusted. Slowly, her confidence grew, replacing the fear that had once dominated her thoughts. She began to see her music not just as a private joy, but as a bridge to connect with others. The night of the benefit concert arrived. The small hall was filled with anticipation. Chairs were arranged neatly. A few bouquets of flowers decorated the stage, and soft lighting highlighted the piano in the center. She walked onto the stage backstage, heart pounding, stomach twisting in nerves. She could hear the quiet chatter of the audience, the shuffling of programs, and the occasional cough. Her hands shook slightly, but she reminded herself to breathe, to focus, and to let the music flow naturally. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage, each step feeling heavier than usual. The audience turned to watch, a mixture of curiosity and expectation in their eyes. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and opened her music notebook. Her fingers hovered above the keys for a brief moment. Then she exhaled slowly and pressed the first note. The sound filled the room. It was soft at first, delicate, as if testing the waters. Then it grew stronger, richer, and more expressive. She played with emotion, allowing each chord to carry her thoughts, memories, and feelings. The audience was silent, captivated by the depth and sincerity of the music. Some closed their eyes, swaying gently with the rhythm, while others watched her fingers move with a mix of admiration and awe. Halfway through her performance, she allowed herself to improvise, weaving new melodies with old ones. The music became alive, almost breathing, carrying the story of her journey from hesitation and fear to confidence and self-expression. She noticed people leaning forward, whispering to one another, and even the organizers exchanging impressed glances. It was a strange and wonderful feeling to see how her music could touch strangers in such a profound way. When she reached the final note, the hall was silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone was suspended in awe. Then the applause erupted, loud and heartfelt, echoing off the walls and filling the space with warmth. She rose slightly from the piano, tears pricking her eyes, overwhelmed by the appreciation and recognition she had received. It was unlike anything she had experienced before, the thrill of being truly seen, not just for what she did for a living, but for who she was and what she could create. After the concert, people approached her with kind words, congratulations, and offers of encouragement. Some asked if she had a recording, others suggested future performances, and a few even inquired about lessons she might offer. She felt a mixture of pride, relief, and disbelief. For years, she had doubted herself, thinking her music was insignificant, yet now she saw the impact it could have. She realized that talent, combined with courage and persistence, could create moments of genuine connection and joy. The next morning, she returned to the restaurant, her steps lighter and her spirit lifted. The piano in the corner no longer felt like a silent object or a distant memory. It was a symbol of her journey, a reminder of the courage she had found and the opportunities that awaited. Customers noticed a new glow about her, and staff members offered quiet words of admiration, sensing the change. She smiled, realizing that the journey was far from over, but she had taken another significant step forward. Over the following weeks, her music continued to draw attention. Local newspapers and social media posts highlighted her talent, praising the young waitress whose piano playing had captivated audiences. Invitations to perform at small events and gatherings began to arrive, and each one felt like both a challenge and an opportunity. She faced each new experience with a mixture of nerves and excitement, remembering the lessons of courage and persistence that had brought her this far. The millionaire, who had first encouraged her in the restaurant, returned one afternoon. He watched quietly as she played a simple melody for a table of guests. After she finished, he approached her with a smile. "I knew you had something special," he said, his voice warm. "It's wonderful to see how far you've come." She blushed, humbled by his words. "I couldn't have done it without your encouragement," she admitted. "It gave me the confidence to try again." He nodded, thoughtful. "You had the talent all along. I only reminded you to believe in it. Keep going. Share your music with as many people as you can." Those words stayed with her. She realized that encouragement, when given at the right moment, could change the course of someone's life. Her journey was not just about skill, it was about courage, persistence, and the willingness to take the first step, even when it was frightening. In the weeks and months that followed, she continued to perform, practice, and grow. Each audience, each note, and each small success strengthened her confidence and her resolve. She began to dream bigger, imagining a future where music was not just a part of her life, but the center of it. She explored new techniques, composed her own pieces, and found joy in sharing her music with others. And as she sat at the piano each day, whether in the quiet of her apartment or the corner of the restaurant, she understood something profound. Her journey had only just begun. The F. Her life had begun to change in ways she could barely have imagined. The piano that had once been just a piece of furniture in the corner of the restaurant was now the center of a growing story. Her music had reached ears beyond the restaurant, and people had started to take notice. Every performance, no matter how small, seemed to gather more attention, more whispers of admiration, and more belief in her talent. She had become more confident, her fingers flowing across the keys with increasing skill and expressiveness, and yet she remained humble, aware of how far she had come and how much farther she could go. Started with small invitations. Local cafes and community centers asked if she would play during special events. A few teachers approached her, offering private lessons to help her refine her technique. Each opportunity felt like a stepping stone, a chance to grow her abilities and connect with more people through her music. She accepted some and politely declined others, careful to pace herself so she would not become overwhelmed. Even with her growing recognition, she remained grounded, never forgetting the restaurant where it had all begun. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the restaurant addressed to her. It was neatly written on fine stationery, something she did not often see in her day-to-day life. She opened it with curiosity and found an invitation to attend a music academy known for nurturing talented young musicians. The letter explained that the academy had heard about her performances and wanted to offer her a scholarship. They would provide training, mentorship, and guidance to help her reach her full potential. Her heart raced as she read the words. She had never imagined anything like this could happen. A music academy? A scholarship? The chance to study under professional musicians who could teach her skills she had only dreamed of? It felt almost unreal. She read the letter again, careful to take in every detail. And then she felt a wave of emotion, excitement, fear, hope, and disbelief all mixed together. That evening, she sat by her small keyboard at home, turning the invitation over in her hands. She thought about the long hours she had spent working at the restaurant, the sacrifices she had made, and the doubts she had struggled with. She remembered her grandfather, who had always believed in her talent, even when life had seemed too difficult. She remembered the first time she had played the piano in the restaurant, the encouragement from the millionaire, and the small recitals that had followed. All of these moments had led her to this point, yet even with excitement, fear lingered. Could she really leave her familiar life behind, even for a dream she had longed to pursue? Could she step into a world of formal training, competitions, and expectations she had never known? The thought was intimidating, but she realized that fear was natural whenever one faced something truly important. The question was not whether she was afraid, but whether she would let fear stop her from pursuing her dream. After a restless night, she made a decision. She would accept the invitation. She would take the scholarship, step into the unknown, and allow herself to grow as a musician. It would be difficult, there would be challenges, and mistakes were certain, but she knew that she could not ignore this opportunity. It was a chance to honor her talent, her passion, and the years she had spent waiting for her music to find its place in the world. The next day, she informed the restaurant manager that she would be taking a leave of absence to attend the academy. The manager was supportive, recognizing how much this meant to her. She packed her modest belongings, making room for sheet music, notebooks, and a few personal items. She said goodbye to her colleagues, who offered words of encouragement, and to the regular customers who had grown fond of her presence and her music. Each farewell carried a mixture of sadness and hope. She knew she was leaving behind a comfort zone, but she was stepping into a future that promised growth, challenge, and possibility. The first days at the music academy were both exhilarating and overwhelming. The building was grand, filled with the sound of students practicing in every corner. The smell of polished wood, instruments, and music sheets filled the air. Teachers and mentors moved through the hallways, offering guidance, critique, and encouragement to the young musicians. She felt both nervous and inspired as she navigated the halls, realizing that she was now part of a community dedicated to nurturing talent and passion. Her first lesson was with a teacher renowned for technical precision and expressive playing. She arrived early, hands trembling slightly, and took her place at the piano. The teacher observed quietly as she played a simple piece, noting her strengths and areas for improvement. "You have raw talent," he said after a few moments, his voice firm but kind. "But talent alone is not enough. You must practice, focus, and challenge yourself. Only then will you reach your full potential." She nodded, taking his words seriously. She had always believed in her ability to feel music, to express it through her fingers, but now she realized that structure, discipline, and knowledge were equally important. She committed herself fully, determined to absorb everything she could from the teachers, the lessons, and the other students. Each day became a balance of practice, learning, and reflection. She stayed up late, refining her technique, exploring new melodies, and pushing herself beyond the limits she had known. Slowly, her confidence grew. She began to understand the nuances of rhythm, phrasing, and expression in ways she had never known. Her fingers became more agile, her touch more precise, and her interpretations more expressive. She experimented with her own compositions, blending the melodies of her childhood with new ideas she learned from the academy. The process was exhausting at times, but it filled her with a sense of purpose and joy she had never experienced before. Outside the academy, life continued, but it felt smaller, quieter. She thought often of the restaurant, the piano in the corner, and the millionaire who had first believed in her. Each memory reminded her of the journey she had traveled, from timid waitress to student at a prestigious music academy. She realized that the support of others, the encouragement at key moments, and the willingness to take risks had been essential to her progress. One afternoon, she was invited to perform at a small showcase held by the academy. It was an event for family, friends, and local music enthusiasts to see the students' progress. She felt a familiar nervousness as she approached the stage, hands trembling slightly over the keys. Yet she also felt excitement, a recognition that she had grown, that she was capable, and that her music had the power to move people. The audience was quiet as she began to play. The notes were clear, confident, and expressive. She allowed herself to improvise slightly, blending her own melodies with the structured lessons she had learned. The audience listened intently, some closing their eyes, others leaning forward, captivated by the depth and emotion in her playing. When she finished, the applause was warm, enthusiastic, and heartfelt. She felt a rush of pride and relief. For the first time, she understood that her music could reach people in ways that went beyond mere sound. It could touch hearts, inspire emotions, and create connection. After the showcase, a mentor approached her, offering guidance and praise. "You have something special," he said. "Not just technical skill, but emotion, soul, and creativity. Continue to nurture it, and you will go far." She smiled, realizing that the journey she had begun in that quiet restaurant corner was now unfolding on a much larger stage. Opportunities that had seemed impossible were now within reach. Her days became filled with learning, practice, and growth. She attended lessons, participated in workshops, and explored new styles and techniques. She collaborated with other students, learning from their perspectives and experiences. Each day brought challenges, but each challenge strengthened her confidence, skill, and understanding of music. She realized that talent alone was never enough. Dedication, persistence, and a willingness to learn were equally important. At night, when she returned to her small apartment, she would sit at her keyboard, reflecting on the day and practicing further. She composed new pieces, blending her personal experiences with the techniques she had learned. Music became not just a pursuit, but a way of understanding herself, her emotions, and her place in the world. She felt alive, purposeful, and fulfilled in a way she had never known. Her story began to attract attention beyond the academy. Local newspapers, music enthusiasts, and even small online publications highlighted the journey of the young woman who had started as a waitress and was now pursuing her dream at a prestigious academy. Invitations to perform at community events, small concerts, and recitals began to arrive. Each invitation was a chance to share her talent, grow her audience, and continue her journey toward mastery. Through it all, she remained grounded. She remembered her beginnings, the struggles, and the people who had supported her along the way. She understood that success was not just about talent or recognition, but about the courage to pursue dreams despite fear, doubt, and uncertainty. Each performance, each lesson, and each new opportunity became a step toward realizing her full potential, a testament to the power of perseverance and belief. And so, she continued to grow, to learn, and to share her music. The young waitress who had once feared to play in front of strangers had transformed into a confident musician, filled with passion. Months passed, and her life had transformed in ways she had only dreamed about. The small apartment, the quiet evenings spent practicing alone, and the restaurant that had once been her world now seemed like distant memories. Yet she carried them with her as reminders of where she had begun and how far she had come. Every performance, every lesson, every challenge had shaped her, refining not only her music, but also her confidence, courage, and understanding of herself. The academy had become a second home. She woke each morning eager to practice, to learn, and to explore new melodies. Her teachers praised her dedication, noting the rare combination of technical skill, emotion, and creativity she displayed. She practiced for hours, sometimes until her fingers ached, but the exhaustion was sweet. Every note she played felt purposeful, every chord a step closer to expressing herself fully. She began composing pieces that were uniquely hers, blending the techniques she had learned with the raw emotion and melodies of her childhood. Word of her talent continued to spread. Local newspapers wrote feature articles about the young woman who had started as a waitress and was now excelling at a prestigious academy. Social media shared videos of her performances, often going viral among music lovers. Invitations to perform at community events, charity concerts, and small professional gatherings began to arrive regularly. She realized that her music was no longer a private joy, but a gift she could share with the world. Despite the growing recognition, she remained grounded. She remembered the first time she had sat at the piano in the restaurant, nervous but compelled by the urge to play. She remembered the encouragement of the millionaire who had believed in her talent, and the small recitals that had allowed her to rediscover her confidence. Each milestone had been a reminder that her journey was not just about skill or fame, but about courage, persistence, and the willingness to follow her passion, even when fear threatened to hold her back. One day, she received an invitation that would change everything. A well-known concert hall, renowned for hosting accomplished musicians, asked her to perform as a featured artist at an upcoming event. The hall was large, elegant, and filled with history. To perform, there was a dream she had not dared to imagine months ago. She felt a mixture of excitement, fear, and disbelief. Could she really step onto such a stage in front of so many people and play music that would reach their hearts? The weeks leading up to the performance were intense. She practiced relentlessly, refining every detail of her pieces, experimenting with new interpretations, and perfecting her compositions. She consulted with her teachers, seeking feedback and incorporating their guidance. Each day brought progress, but also moments of doubt. She sometimes questioned whether she was ready, whether her music would truly resonate with an audience of strangers. But she reminded herself of every small victory that had brought her to this point: the first notes played in the restaurant, the recitals, the academy showcases, and drew strength from her journey. Finally, the day arrived. She arrived at the concert hall early, taking in the grandeur of the space. The polished wooden floors, the rows of seats stretching back into the shadows, the soft, warm lighting, it all felt surreal. Backstage, she felt the familiar flutter of nerves in her stomach, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared herself. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and allowed herself to remember why she was here. It was not for applause, recognition, or accolades. It was for the music, for the joy of creating, and for the chance to touch hearts. When her name was announced, she walked onto the stage, each step echoing softly in the vast hall. She felt the weight of expectation, but also a sense of purpose she had never known before. Sitting at the grand piano, she adjusted the bench, placed her fingers lightly on the keys, and paused. The hall was silent, waiting, and in that silence, she found clarity. She began to play. The first notes were delicate, almost hesitant, but as she continued, her confidence grew. Each chord carried emotion, memory, and intention. The music flowed naturally, guided by years of practice, experience, and a deep connection to her own story. She allowed herself to improvise, weaving together melodies of her past, the joy of discovery, and the beauty of the present moment. The audience was captivated, drawn into the emotion and sincerity of her performance. As she played, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. She remembered her childhood, the hours spent with her grandfather learning melodies, the struggles her family faced, and the sacrifices she had made. She remembered the first time she had dared to play at the restaurant, the encouragement of the millionaire, and the early recitals that had given her courage. Each note she played was a tribute to that journey, a story told without words, yet understood by everyone listening. Halfway through, she allowed herself to fully immerse in the music, closing her eyes and letting her fingers speak. The hall seemed to breathe with her, the notes resonating through the space, reaching every corner. She noticed subtle reactions from the audience, soft smiles, tears, heads nodding in appreciation. It was a strange, beautiful feeling to witness the impact of her music, To know that something she created could move people she had never met. When the final note echoed and faded into silence, the hall remained still for a heartbeat. Then a wave of applause erupted, thunderous and sustained, filling every corner of the space. She opened her eyes, blinking back tears, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. The applause was not just for her skill, but for the courage, passion, and authenticity she had brought to the performance. She stood, bowed deeply, and felt a profound sense of fulfillment. After the performance, she was approached by mentors, music enthusiasts, and even professional musicians. They praised her technique, her emotional depth, and the originality of her compositions. Some offered opportunities to perform in larger venues, to collaborate with other musicians, and to record her own pieces. Each offer was a reminder of the journey she had undertaken, the courage she had shown, and the talent she had nurtured through years of dedication. That evening, as she left the concert hall, she felt a sense of peace and purpose, unlike anything she had experienced before. The city lights glittered around her, and the cool night air felt refreshing against her skin. She thought about her journey, the small apartment, the restaurant, the encouragement of strangers, the academy, the countless hours of practice, and the moments of doubt she had overcome. Every experience had shaped her, guiding her to this moment of accomplishment and recognition. In the following weeks, her career continued to grow. She performed at more events, collaborated with other musicians, and began recording her own compositions. Each performance, whether in a small community center or a large concert hall, was an opportunity to connect with audiences, to share emotion and story through music, and to continue growing as an artist. She remained humble, aware that talent alone was never enough. Dedication, practice, courage, and the willingness to embrace new challenges were the true drivers of her success. Yet, even with the growing attention and recognition, she never forgot her beginnings. She continued to visit the restaurant from time to time, sitting quietly at the piano in the corner, playing softly for those who wished to listen. The memories of her first performance, the encouragement of the millionaire, and the simple joy of expressing herself through music reminded her of the importance of humility, gratitude, and connection. One afternoon, she received a letter from a young girl who had seen her perform online. The letter was filled with admiration, gratitude, and hope. The girl wrote about her own struggles, her love for music, and how watching the performances had inspired her to continue learning. Reading the letter, she felt a deep sense of responsibility and joy. She realized that her journey had created ripples, inspiring others to pursue their passions and believe in their own abilities. She began mentoring young students, sharing her experiences, techniques, and encouragement. She taught them not just how to play notes, but how to express emotion, how to face fear, and how to persevere. Each student she guided reminded her of her own beginnings, the challenges she had faced, and the people who had supported her along the way. She found joy in nurturing talent, in giving others the courage to take the first step, just as someone had done for her years ago. Through it all, she understood that her journey was about more than personal success. It was about the power of music to connect, inspire, and transform lives. It was about courage, perseverance, and the willingness to embrace opportunity even when it was frightening. It was about gratitude for those who encouraged her, believed in her, and helped her see her potential. As she sat at the piano one quiet evening, playing a piece she had composed herself, she reflected on how far she had come. From a waitress hesitant to play in front of strangers, to a student at a prestigious academy, to a performer in renowned concert halls, her journey had been extraordinary. She realized that every challenge, every doubt, and every small victory had shaped her, teaching her resilience, patience, and the true meaning of passion. She smiled as she played the final notes, the music filling the room, her heart full of gratitude and joy. She knew that her journey was ongoing, that there would always be new challenges, opportunities, and X.